contours of the origins of the discipline of sociology. We have discussed the idea of sociological imagination, which is central to thinking about what we mean by a sociological, by developing a sociological perspective. So I think that if you look at any discipline, and again, let me speak specifically about sociology. If you look at sociology as a discipline, yes, there are theories and methods and approaches, but also um, how do you how do you build a perspective for which is going to be central to the discipline. So in order to sort of answer this question, we introduce the idea of sociological imagination, and we said that studying society really means that you have to be able to build this kind of empathy. You have to be able to have an alternate way of seeing, of just 1 second. Yeah. So it brings forward then this uh, uh, it brings forward for all of us, those who are going to be those who are sociologists, those who are beginning to study sociology, this way of seeing. And what is central to this way of seeing is that we should be able to make connections between what Mills calls the private issue or our private troubles and the larger public issues, so that nothing is really private and personal. Everything that we are experiencing, everything that we observe as social phenomenon have a broader context, and they have to be located in that broader context in order to understand it. So it's in that sort of also in that, as a continuation of that idea, we said, okay, when we think of the discipline of sociology, what is its broader context? And there we talked about really sort of, I said, three moments: the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, and the French Revolution, as being critical to shaping the discipline in the West, right, where it originally began in European society. Now, if I think about India, of course, one of the fundamental again forces, or one of the prime motivators for how the discipline developed has to be tied to its colonial history. Um, so when you think of the early Indian sociologists trying to establish the discipline as a professional discipline, building departments of sociology in universities, you see that what they were resisting was a certain kind of colonial knowledge. So, so again, the point is that we understand that the specific history of European society is important for the context of the origin of the discipline in European society in the West. Uh, some of those contexts are applicable to when we think of other contexts, to when we think of the development of sociology in the developing world. But there are also other historical aspects, other social aspects that we have to consider when we think of the discipline of sociology in these nation states, in sort of a newly emerging nation states. Yeah, so this is broadly what we covered so far, and then we looked at three sort of theoretical points of view. Functionalism, um, conflict perspective, and symbolic interactionism. The three are really, and again, there are several other theoretical perspectives that you will come up with. So, for instance, there is structuralism, and there is structural functionalism, and there within symbolic interactionism, or within interpretive approaches. Again, there are several theories that that are there. I broadly wanted to give you a sense of the, when I say three different strands of functionalism, conflict, and symbolic interactionism, I broadly wanted to give you a sense of certain theoretical traditions within the discipline of sociology, right? And they are connected now, you will see, to different sorts of approaches. Uh, um, how do we enter into the discussion of the kind of work, of the kind of research that is being done by sociology? Now, I could think of these approaches in terms of a methodological approach. It means that what is my method? So we began by saying that what are the questions that sociology is asking? And I said that you will see that there are two ideas that runs throughout the course. The first idea is that these are questions of social order, and the second idea is the idea of embeddedness, that any institution, any context is embedded in several others. So if I think of the context of the discipline of sociology, it is embedded in a larger context, a larger historical context. So anything that I want to study is embedded. And the other question that I said is, that we are concerned with order. When I say order, we say that, okay, what is the relationship between the individual and the collective? How does the individual retain a sense of purpose, a sense of individualism, while still being attached to a collective and having a collective sort of identity? Now, this is what we study. What is the problem in sociology? Then comes the issue of what kind of perspective do I need in order to be able to study social phenomena? And thirdly, then, what are the broad theoretical approaches or the broad theoretical contours of the discipline? And now I'm saying that, you need a method, that you need to outline certain processes, certain routes that you will take in order to understand the social phenomena. And these approaches, again, we are going to look at three different kinds of approaches. So approaches are similar to thinking, to really, they're about, and I have it on the slide there, they're about a whole system of thinking. And they have sort of, we go through the issue of what are the basic assumptions in this system of thinking, what are the questions that need to be answered, and what are the examples. I'm sorry, that's good scientific research and not food scientific research. So what are the examples of good scientific research? How does good scientific research, what does good scientific research look like? Next slide, please. So we will again here refer to three approaches. First is positivism or positive social science. Second is interpretivism or interpretivist social science. And the third is critical social science. No, it's fine. It's fine. You can, yeah, keep it there. Yeah, right. So, so I had said right at the beginning that one of the concerns in the original, in the sort of, in the origins of the discipline of sociology, is that it was in a sense competing with the natural sciences. And so the early sociologists were trying to set up sociology along the lines of a model of science, which is value-free, atomistic, and it could focus on the discovery of causal laws. So the focus was on trying to, as far as possible, imitate the natural sciences. And we all know that there are problems with this kind of imitation. Now, so Yeah. This this is one of the approaches in sociology, positivism, which where you take on the approach of the natural sciences, and I will then go into what broadly are the assumptions, and what are the basic assumptions, what are the kinds of routes that you could take if you had to study a particular social phenomenon through a positivist standpoint. Can you go to the next slide, please? Next one. All right. So I will come back to the other theoretical aspects that you have in the slide later on. Now here, what we are saying then is that if you think about what positivist researchers were doing, when I say that they were trying to emulate, imitate what was going on in the natural sciences, then what are the sorts of things that they were focusing on? One is, we can move to, I think, slide 4 or 5. No, the next one, 5. Yeah. So, so what they were trying to do was, in a similar way, have tried to arrive at certain causal laws of human behavior. So how do you establish a discipline as a scientific discipline? You must be able to make generalizations, right? So you must be able to say something which are at the realm of a sort of larger, universally applicable laws of human behavior. And so the positivists would try to do this by in a similar way as you would do in the sciences, which is that you would use a deductive sort of logic. Now, if you go back to what Auguste Comte was talking about in terms of the different stages of society, remember one of the stages he talks about is a positive stage, a positivist stage. What happens in this, what is primary in the positivist state is the application of reason, the application of human reason. And so here again, what you're doing is you are trying to apply reason to social phenomenon in order to discover certain laws of these concerning these social phenomena and the laws of human behavior. Now, what is the assumption? What are the assumptions in the positivist approach? The first assumption, as I said, is that that things are governed by human reason, that we have the ability to reason, and we can precisely use this reason to understand what is going on. What is the nature of reality? And remember, we talked about two concepts, ontology and please go back to slide 5. Talked about two concepts, ontology and epistemology. So ontology is the question of what is the nature of reality. What do we believe is the nature of reality? Now, positivists will believe it's what is called a realist position. Positivists will believe, when I do positive social science, I will believe that reality is something that is out there. It is separate from me as an individual. What I do and what we do as individuals will not affect the reality that exists out there, right? And this reality is discoverable through a process of very close, detailed observation, right? Now, obviously, the observation that you do as scientists is again connected to certain questions, it is connected to the application of reason, it is connected to trying to arrive at certain conclusions, and those conclusions have to have that effect of being generalizable. So the realist position then is that reality exists out there. It also has it is patterned, so that whenever you see reality, whatever phenomenon you're seeing, you will be able to observe a certain pattern. And it is science and the methods of science, with the methods of science as in close observation, close detailed observation, systematic recording of observations, analyzing what those observations, how those observations are connected to each other. Is there a causal connection between two or three or more things? That is the domain of science. And this kind of reasoning helps humans to discover and to discover this reality and to understand the patterns and to understand the order that emerges through these patterns. So, so then what we are saying is that I may observe something, but whatever I observe has a deeper essence. And so for me as a social scientist, it is important to find what that deeper essence is, right? So, we will learn about, we'll use the example of Emile Durkheim's work on suicide to see how you can use suicide as a way of going to the deeper essence of things. So I can look at the rates of suicide in a society, which is what Durkheim did, and use that to comment on notions of social solidarity, comment on how suicide is connected to solidarity between individuals, solidarity among institutions within society. So now what else do we assume about society? That this reality that, yes, Himanshu?
Ma'am, I have a doubt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ma'am, when we are discussing the two concepts, the ontology and the epistemology, you said that ontology is just what the question of nature of reality. So we had already assumed that the society, whatever it may be, the society, whatever the people are trying to do, the reality will exist independently of what people are doing. So positive, the stage of society which is positive, which will believe that reality will exist, and ontology will also assume that the reality will exist. So they are both connected. So ma'am, it is that so.
Yeah. So what now ontology is the meaning of ontology is what is one's position about the nature of reality, and you can have different understanding of the nature of reality. So I could argue that reality is something that does not exist out there. Reality is something that is constructed. So there are these two positions that we are taking. The first, that reality exists out there and it is independent of sort of individual manipulation. But I could say that reality is not something that exists out there. It is completely dependent on how individuals engage with each other. So that reality is constructed in or co-constructed as individuals engage with each other. So how I uh, um, how I look at suicide rate and what it impacts will change depending on my approach to reality. So, what we are saying here is that if I believe that the nature of reality is something that is out there and it is discoverable through observation, I will have a certain kind of method of observation, of looking at my data, of trying to see the patterns in my data and analyzing and then finally making certain generalizations. If I believe that reality is something that is made as we engage with each other, then that is, how I will go about doing my study, that itself will change. Because when I believe that reality is something that is interpretive, and we will go into when we discuss the next approach, that's what we're going to do. We are going to see what does the interpretive aspect of reality, what does that mean? And if I believe that, what kind of study will I do? Now, you see, what we are doing is similar to what I was trying to establish earlier on, the idea of multiplicity and how a discipline deals with this idea of multiplicity. Yeah. So when we get to interpretivism, you'll realize that those who do interpretive social science are actually critical of the positivists, because they say that this is not the view of reality at all. What you're saying about reality itself is problematic, because reality is something that does not exist out there. It's made because, and this is about, again, about social reality, right? We're not talking about natural reality. We're not talking about sort of physical changes. Of course, if I talk about the physical changes, rain will happen because of a certain natural context, because of certain things that happen in nature, and I as an individual cannot change that. Yeah. But what happens within if I'm studying the family, and the family as an institution, what happens within the family is can be changed by members of the family. It can also it can also be changed just by the fact that there is an external observer who's observing what is happening in the family. So these are the sort of two views of reality. Right now we are sticking with positive social science. I understand your question. I hope I've been able to answer it in some form, but I do think it will get clearer when we move to interpretive social science.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So this these are the characteristics of the reality when I believe that reality exists out there, that it is discoverable, it is patterned, has a natural order. Yeah, sorry, previous slide, I've not finished yet. It has a natural order. It is stable. It is stable because it's not likely to change because of small sort of changes in individual worlds, and that our knowledge of this reality is additive, that you already have something, you have certain understanding, you try to build on that. So you already have certain general laws. Your business as a scientist is not to then put forward those very same laws, right? The idea is that you take those laws and you try to build on them. So knowledge is additive. You sort of build on existing knowledge to then say something more. And this is where we had, I think, talked a little bit about the whole aspect of inductive and deductive reasoning. So that here, what you generally have is, on the basis of existing knowledge, on the basis of existing theories, you try and have a hypothesis, you try and have a question which you are then trying to test. So if I already know of a certain pattern, what I then try to do is I try to test whether that pattern is true or not, or I try to advance a sort of another kind of analysis of the reality. So what I do is in positivist social science is that I use deductive logic, and I use deductive logic along with very precise empirical observations of individual behavior, of what is happening in society, in order to try and discover a set of probabilistic laws of human behavior, laws of what it means to have these sorts of social connections. And so what I'm ultimately trying to do is I'm trying to also predict general patterns of human behavior. I'm trying to say that if you have these sorts of conditions, then this is how human beings will behave. This is what will happen. So, I had given the example of the Hawthorne experiment, and I said that, even when they, um, um, when they improved the conditions of work, the productive capacity did not really increase. Now, behind that is an assumption that better conditions of work will lead to better productivity, right? So it is this observation or this sort of aspect, this pattern that we were trying to test in by doing this study of in the Hawthorne experiment. Now, in positivist social science, so that was sorry, on slide 5. Oh, back. Yeah, yes. Next one. 5, 6 is fine. Yeah. So in positivist social science, then the first is what is the purpose of positivist social science? What is the purpose of this approach? The purpose of this approach is to be able to develop certain scientific explanations, is to be able to discover and document how human beings will behave, and try and arrive at certain general laws about this human behavior. So you're trying to develop certain abstract principles and models which will be able to, with which you'll be able to understand human behavior. And it implies that you are thinking of certain kinds of universal applicability of what is going on. And then I said, okay, what is the nature of reality? Um, now, the other assumption that we must look into when we are talking about positivist social science is what is the nature of human beings, right? And uh, uh, so positivist social science assumes that this kind of view of human beings, that human beings are, first of all, they're rational. They are able to they're able to reason. They're able to apply logic. And when we say rational, what do we mean? What do we mean that somebody is able to apply reason? What When I say you make rational decisions, what does that mean? Can anybody tell me?
Ma'am, rational decision are those that we took besides that we took on a basis of or doing all the interpretations. What s- means there is
What
some sort of
principle?
there is
How
no
do you
sort.
decide?
It will depend on person to person. Like
Taking decision based on logics.
Can we have some videos on? Nobody's put their videos on today. I forgot to request you and you didn't do it. So let's take 5 minutes to talk about what do we mean by rational decision making, and then and put some of your videos on, please, so I can see some faces. Or is everybody in bed and doing this class? Nobody wants video on. What is the problem? Okay, Himanshu. Others? So what are you doing in your other classes? Do you have your videos on? Do you have to, is there any, or you don't put it on generally? Then it's always the usual ones. Others? Vishal, Yash, Vaishnavi, Suyash, you're all here, but you can't put your videos on. Prashant, Nikita. Okay, so we have to have a, this thing. You'll have to. Some of you, you will have to put your videos on. I think it's very distressing to teach to blank screens. So let's talk a little bit about what it means to be rational. Himanshu, you said that it's about an individual sort of interpretation, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So does that mean there can't be anything universal? When we say you are being rational, what does that mean? How do you decide when you take
logics?
Yeah?
Making decisions based on certain logics.
Logic, certain logic. So you use logic. What does that logic mean? So if I say logic, it means we can, there is something universal, right? It's not just about individual interpretation. How do you choose between, like, you have let's say you have 50 rupees to spend? How do you make that decision?
We make decisions based on gains and losses.
Gains and losses. Okay, so individual perception and understanding of gains and losses.
Yes,
All
and
right.
that is probably the logic that we also use in order to make decisions.
That is probably the what? Sorry.
It is also the part of the logic that probably humans use in order to make some decision.
Okay.
Like the logic is basically how much gain I will make or how much losses I will make if I take this particular action. We interpret all the actions and we try to come out at the best possible action.
Could you, some of you, could you at least, if you're not, don't want to speak, can you write in the chat what does it mean to be rational? So we have the idea of logic, that there is the application of logic, right? Now, and so if you look at the slide I have put there, that what is the nature of human beings? It's that we are self-interested, we're pleasure seeking and pain avoiding, right? So partly this is universal, right? You could say that this is universal, and the logic then applies in a sense to these aspects, right? So when you say logic, it is framed by the fact that you want to fulfill okay, somebody's Vansh is written without bias and emotional compulsiveness, right? Now, when we say logic, it's also about the logical, when I say rational, the logical relationship between means and end, right? What are the means that are available to me, and to what end? To what is the ultimate goal with regard to which I am making a particular decision. So rationality then, in the social sciences, is really about uncovering this, to analyze what are the potential outcomes, right? So that potential outcomes in terms of your end. So there is a logical relationship between the means and end, and would be based on logic rather than on traditions, superstitions, and values. Yeah. And that logic is really about this relationship between means and end, right? So we assume, when we are doing positivist social science, we assume that human beings are rational. We assume that they are able to take decisions based on logic rather than on all this other stuff, on tradition, superstition, etc. But But this, when we say that it's based on logic, it's this relationship between means and end. I have certain means and I know I have certain goals, and I will try and optimize my resources, my means. So most decisions then are what are called these sorts of optimizing decisions, these decisions which, what is the best possible case that I can build for myself, given that I have these means and given that this is my end, right? So if I'm thirsty and I have 10 rupees, then it's obvious that I will, if I have 30, then I may buy a bottle of Coke. If I have 10, then I may just buy one of those small cups of water, right? So, but at the same time, you know that you may have 10 rupees, you're thirsty, but if there is a child who comes begging for that money, you may still decide to divide that money, like give 5 and keep 5 for yourself, right? Or give entire 10. So the potential outcomes in this case, where or the self-interest in this case is um, mm, is conditioned not just by need, not just by felt need, but also conditioned by certain other things like values. So you see how values or other aspects do enter the picture of this logical relationship between means and ends. But what we are seeing here is that human beings, when we do positivist social science, we presume that human beings are rational. We presume that they are self-interested, they're pleasure-seeking and pain-avoiding, that they will choose the best-case scenario, the best options. And this is what we call a mechanical model of man, of human beings, and then we can actually say that we study social phenomena can be studied, can and ought to be studied as things. Now, this is what Emile Durkheim. This was Emile Durkheim's position. What he said was, you can treat social facts as things. So when I make the point that reality is something that exists out there, reality is something that okay, just before I get into that, there is a comment in the chat which says that an individual can't be both social positive and rational at the same time. What is the meaning of social positive?
Ma'am, I'm audible.
Yeah, you are.
Ma'am, I mean to say that if any of our family member is got injured, he's in hospital. So our hoping of him being good won't change it.
Sorry, you weren't audible. Maybe it's best you write it.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yeah. Others, can you hear him?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Go ahead.
Ma'am, I mean to say if any one of our loved ones is got injured, so our hoping of him be healthy or good won't change it now. That he got with an accident. So how can we be both rational and social positive at the same time?
No, I'm asking you, what is the meaning of social positive? That's what I'm not getting.
I mean, thinking of that he will be getting better soon. The person who got injured will getting better soon.
The person
Who got injured will be getting better soon.
Sorry, write it down. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I think best you write it down. Yeah, so this sharing our money with a hungry child, will it be rational or not? It is rational. It is still rational. So when we think about this means end relationship, what we are saying is that there are certain your goals are I mean, it is rational because if it's connected to your goals in that sense. So if you're making that decision, your values do come into logical analysis, right? As sociologists, we'll believe that your values will come into logical, and even if you look at the realm of economics, we know that certain decisions. So if you have a certain amount of money and your goal is to buy one thing, that goal will be altered by all of these other considerations, could be altered by these other considerations as well, right? So once you make your point, we can respond to it. I'm carrying on with what we were discussing. So so this is a mechanical model of human beings, and it is in this connection that Durkheim will say that you can study social phenomena. When you have this kind of a view of human beings, you can study social phenomena as things. And so he says social facts are things. Things are not dependent on the will and actions of individuals, and it's possible to study this in the same way as you would study natural phenomena, which is again that you observe very closely and you try and make connections between apparently unconnected aspects. So the point that I made earlier, that there is something which is of a deeper essence, that we are trying to uncover that something which is of a deeper essence. So so the example here of Durkheim is that is that of suicide, and that he conducted a systematic study of how okay, hoping, one second, let me take this thing. Hoping, so Bukia has written, hoping that a severely injured person will get better won't change the reality. Okay, others, what do you think of this? Hoping is social positive here. So your earlier point was that you can't be both social positive and rational at the same time. Is that true? Others?
Here he is trying to say that if somebody is injured, then rationally we should not be very much hopeful that he will get well soon.
Yeah, sorry, what did you say?
I think, sir, he is trying to say that if somebody is injured, then according to him, thinking rationally will mean that maybe that person will not be able to get well soon. But if we are hopeful, like he has written, social positive, then according to that, humans will always be very hopeful that he will be getting well soon. And so he's trying to say that being rational and being social positive, which is being hopeful, cannot be together.
Cannot happen together.
Yes, probably that is what he is trying to say.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if I think about, I mean, I think there are different interpretations of reality which is contained in that statement. On the one hand, you could, if you look at a reality as something that is objective, it means that if somebody is severely sick or has a severe illness and is not likely to get better, just simply hope will not make that person better, right? So that's what you're saying. So, but here you have two different aspects of reality. How do I see reality? Reality as the objective condition of a person who's ill or injured, or reality as the subjective experience of the person who is ill as well as of everybody else involved in that situation. So positivist social science will agree with you on this, that hoping and being rational, what you call social positive and being rational will not go together, right? But when I take a view of reality that takes into account that there can be multiple sort of positions on reality, that reality is not something that is objective and out there, that reality is something that is experienced, that is made by the people who are engaging in a particular situation, I will say that both those things can go together. So I can, I may feel that if a person who's severely ill, and allopathic medicine has said that you cannot treat this person, and the person is sure to die, I may still hope and I may go to all sorts of alternate. I think wishful thinking is better than social positive. Okay. So I may still feel that. So my reality will really be about or the person who is ill and injured. That person's reality will involve both these things. Can involve the objective interpretation that I am going to die, and the subjective, sort of more subjective understanding that perhaps there can be hope in other forms of medicine. So that both those things can happen simultaneously when I think about reality as something that is not simply something that is out there. And so this is, I think it's a good example because it brings in to focus the two interpretations or the two kinds of understanding of reality. One, which is that reality is objective, it is out there, it cannot be changed by individual will, it is independent of individual will and action. And the other, that reality is subjective, it is made through the interpretations and interactions of individuals. So it's constantly subject to what individuals are doing, feeling, and how they are acting. Now, Durkheim will tell us that when you're treating social facts as things, we know that these things are not dependent on the will and actions of individuals, and that these, when we study them as things, we must discard all kinds of preconceptions that we have about reality. So to study something as a scientist, the concepts that are used outside of science have to be discarded. Only that which we observe, we systematically record, and we make connections between things, only those can be used in understanding a particular phenomenon. And the example that we will deal with it in a little bit more detail is that of suicide, where we say that he looks at rates of suicide and he says, okay, why are suicides high at certain points in time in society? And he's trying to make a connection between the rates of suicide and how the collective feels. Right? So, which is where he brings up this notion of social solidarity. How connected do we feel with each other? And one of the sort of very simple explanations could be that when you do not feel connected to the collective, when you don't have a sense of solidarity, is when you are likely to end your life. Right? And he gives different examples of, and he classifies suicides in terms of its relationship to solidarity in different ways, and we will discuss that later. But here what is important is to see that Durkheim is one social scientist, and the early one social scientist in the early years of the discipline, where you could think of social facts as things. Yes, Chanel, you want to say something? You can give the example.
Yes, ma'am. I was just while you were explaining how there can be this contradiction between how we analyze our own human biases and values, and then we try to come to a rational choice. So definitely, I think when a sociological, a social scientist goes on to the field, since values like empathy is what we study and what we also like take into consideration during our research, it is very natural to come to like such doubts, which I think Bhukya or like others have pointed out. So I was just trying to relate this with the whole pandemic experience, how it has been. Like we know rationally, like when a pandemic arrives, we're supposed to be prepared with the idea of people dying around and with death, and it could be anyone, and we also have seen it around us like as empirical facts and figures. So just trying to come to terms with the very rational choice of wanting to survive. Like I think a very positivist approach here would be when we really see how, despite of all the human values of grieving or just feeling hopeless, which are just values and emotions, at the end of the day rationally we all still want to survive. And there is this whole scientific notion of survival of the fittest comes into play. So rationally, when that is all rationally done, right? Like when we derive at conclusions, when we take the risk and we analyze it, the whole point of wanting to survive. So this is just something I wanted to put across.
All right. So yeah. So in a sense, we try to think of a social phenomenon in terms of a thing, in the way that we would see a thing, and we see it as something that is not dependent on how we engage or how we engage with each other, what our wills or actions are. So you could, I suppose what Chanel is also trying to say is that you could think of death, disease and death in the context of a pandemic. You could study that as a social fact, and you could study that as a thing, which is that you're then you must then and within that you can then think about what sorts of connections you may make between different aspects. So one of the probably one of the connections that you can make is this idea of survival and dealing with death, right? And so you can think about what is the connection between these two things? If I treat this as a thing, if I treat the pandemic as a social fact, and then try and maybe one aspect of that pandemic is dealing with death, and I can then try and think about, and of course I would have to do close observation and all of that to think through the question of how do you deal with death. And here she's connecting it with survival, to say that one way of dealing with death is the urge to survive, right? Yeah, so I think that what we are then trying to say is that when we say social facts are things, we mean that social phenomena have to be defined by certain common characteristics. And this definition has to fit. Now, you see, the pandemic for us, it's a great example, because here is a one social phenomenon for which is defined by these external characteristics. For all of us, the fear of dying, right? The fear of disease, right? Being locked down in your homes, social distancing, right? So all of these things and these common characteristics define the phenomena of the pandemic, and that it has shaped which is the context of our social reality now. Yeah. So in that sense, it's very amenable to being treated as a thing, and very amenable to being studied in this mode of positivist social science. Next slide, please. So we've gone through the nature. What is the nature of reality? We've gone through what is the nature of human beings, and we are using Durkheim as a way of understanding, or as an example to say that, okay, how has social science, how has sociology dealt with this positivism, and Durkheim's model was treat social facts as things, and so that they have to be considered from a point of view which is presented in isolation from their individual manifestations. So again, going back to the pandemic, I listed things which we've all experienced. They're part of our individual manifestations, but they can be presented in isolation from them as well. The deaths, you can see the deaths, you can measure them, you can count them. The data is available. The disease, again, the data is available. Isolation and the lockdown, again, data is available, so they can be observed independently of their individual manifestations. So what we are saying then is that you're trying to study aspects of social reality which have crystallized, which have certain legal moral rules, which are really the facts of the social structure. Or they're tied to certain fixed objects which are not dependent on subjective impressions, which is not to say that subjective impressions are not there. So when we were talking about this, what I think Bhukia was saying, social positive and so on, those are the subjective interpretations. The subjective interpretations are there, but when we do positivism, we say that we can look at it objectively. It is an objective reality where we don't need to depend on subjective impressions. Okay, next slide, please. So the third point that we are going to make is what is the nature of human agency? How do we perceive human agency? And here. Positivist social science then really downplays human agency. So because what you're saying is now the pandemic, right? It will, what Bhukia's example was showing again was that irrespective of whether I'm hopeful or not, irrespective of whether I shower love on the person who is ill or not, the person is going to die. Right? The objective condition of health and disease is such that the person is going to die. So this is positivist social science. It takes into account this kind of objective view. And when I take the objective view of reality, and when I take this objective view of reality, it means that I'm really saying that beyond a point, as individuals, our wills and actions are not going to be able to determine that final outcome. That final outcome is fixed. It is natural. I can, the apple's falling from the tree, it is going to fall to the ground. I can try to change its direction by doing some things, but that doesn't change the fact that there is this law of gravity, and that is what this is what the law of gravity will do. So the law of health and illness is when you're severely sick and your bodily organs are compromised, it is going to lead to death. We cannot do, as individuals, we may not be able to change things, unless there is a possibility of that change in the objective condition itself. So, so positivist social science emphasis is on the structural aspects. That, so we are asking questions of what are the sort of determining mechanisms that produce certain effects? How do external forces impinge on or impact both individuals as well as society generally? So here then again what you're saying is that individuals will follow this kind of rational decision making, machine-like rational decision making, so that the logic of decision making is connected to who we are as individuals, which is that we are pleasure seeking, pain avoiding, and it is on that basis that we make our decisions. So I may believe that I'm an agent, but actually there are powerful social forces which are beyond me, which are beyond individual control, that actually shape my decisions and actions. So rationality is one such powerful social force that I may think that I'm making the choice according to what I want and what I think is important and valuable, but ultimately there is a kind of frame which has already been provided to me within which I operate. At the same time, even as I say this, and it sounds very deterministic, but what we see is that positivist social science uses the idea of laws or causal laws in a probabilistic way, so that there is always room for maneuver. There is always room for saying that other things are possible, right? So if you look at rationality, we always, we are keeping room for, we are making arrangements for the entering of values, because when we say goals, when we say means end, we know that that end can also be in some way connected to value, etc. So so laws in a sense are probabilistic laws. All right, next slide, please. Now, so we had nature of reality. We had what was the second thing? So we had the purpose. What is the purpose of positivist social science? What is the nature of reality? What is the nature of human beings? And how is human agency conceived? And then we are now looking at the assumptions around the relationship between science and common sense. And positivist social science, because it does not take an interpretivist view, because it doesn't really focus on the subjective experiences of people, what it's interested in is that what it argues is that there has to be a clear separation between science and non-science. So you see, earlier we said the categories of understanding of general understanding cannot enter into scientific explanation. Scientific explanation has to use categories that have emerged from very careful observation, documentation, comparison, and it is through that the concepts and categories will emerge. So there is a clear separation between science and non-science. So I will, Durkheim will use social solidarity as a concept. A feeling of togetherness cannot be the concept, right? So that's the difference between a separating the science from the non-science. And so what science, again, when I say positivist social science, we do borrow certain ideas from common sense. So when I say feeling of togetherness, when I say social solidarity, I'm drawing from that feeling of togetherness, the feeling of the we, but I am removing from it things that appear logically inconsistent or sloppy. So when I say social solidarity, I'm trying to say that, okay, I can give a definition of it that then that is logically consistent, that has again certain common external characteristics by which I can explain it. Now, what is interesting is that for Durkheim, he says that there are certain things in society that you can't really observe. You can't observe solidarity. You can't, you may not be able to really fully observe it in terms of an empirical observation. And he says that most of these things which are not clearly observable have to be linked to certain external categories or external characteristics or external indices. So for solidarity, his index is the nature of law. What is the nature of law? And he says that you, by looking at the nature of law, you can understand the nature of solidarity in a society. We'll look at this in a little bit more detail, but basically he was talking about repressive law and restitutive law. Repressive law, which is like an eye for an eye, which means that if you cause harm to somebody, you have to compensate for that harm, right? So a simple example would be the death sentence for murder. If somebody commits murder, that person must be given the death sentence. So he says that if you look at the nature of law, you can say what is the nature of solidarity, and he makes a distinction between two kinds of solidarity: mechanical solidarity and organic solidarity. And he says simple societies had mechanical solidarity, which was based on likeness, which was based on the fact that people were similar to each other and they came together because they were similar to each other. And organic solidarity, which he says is the feature of complex societies. And in complex societies, you have more interdependence, you have more extensive and very specialized division of labor. And law in these societies is not repressive, it is restitutive, which is that it tries to, very simply put, it tries to restore a disruption that has taken place. So again, this is also something that we will take up in a little bit more detail later on. At this point, what we are seeing is what is the difference, what is the relationship between science and common sense. In positivist social science, we take from common sense, but it has to be logically consistent. It has to be the language of science which dominates. All right. Any questions? Yes, Himanshu.
Ma'am, in the distinguishing feature of the solidarity, we said about the mechanical and organic solidarity. So, ma'am, it should be the other way around. Like organic solidarity means something which is pretty natural, and mechanical solidarity is something which is complex. Is it that? Because
No, not
why am I?
according to Durkheim. Mechanical is basically that he's saying that he's using it in a sense that it means that people are really connected because they're together. So it's tied to the example of small societies where your connections to each other are direct. As societies become more complex, as population increases, it's no longer possible to have that direct connection. So the connection is through the idea of division of labor, is through specialization and the interdependence that specialization brings up. In mechanical solidarity, you do have that interdependence, but it is on a much smaller scale. It is on the basis of knowing the person you are dependent on, right? So actually physically knowing the person, so that in a sense, so solidarity is something that can be in that sense observed very easily in that society. But what he's saying is that we are not looking at solidarity. How do we understand there is solidarity? We understand there is solidarity by looking at the nature of law. So that's his point. It's that you can't actually see it. So when I think of social facts, there are many things that you can't actually there are many aspects that you can't thingify. It can't. How does it become a thing? It becomes a thing when, even though you cannot see it, you place it on another concept or another idea or another thing which can be thinkified, so which can be seen. So law in its operation can be seen. And when solidarity is simple and it's based on this kind of face-to-face, almost face-to-face connection, that's when we talk about mechanical solidarity. And here what we see is that societies with this kind, with repressive laws will will have mechanical solidarity. Societies which are far more complex will have restitutive laws, and the nature of solidarity will be organic. I mean, I suppose what we're doing here is not taking the literal meaning of the words, but we are again replacing that with the social scientific sort of understanding. So he's connecting the words mechanical and organic to a certain explanation, to a certain theoretical explanation. All right, I think yeah, it's almost time, so we'll stop here. If you have any questions, we can take questions. We will meet. I noticed that most of you haven't submitted any tutorial writing. Don't keep it till the end, because I mean, I haven't put a last date because I wanted it to be slightly flexible. But if that means that you just keep everything for later, that's going to cause problems. So if you'd like, if you feel that it's better that I put a date, we can do that. I mean, the date roughly is the Saturday of the following week. So we start the second tutorial today. By Saturday, you should have all submitted. But I think very few people have submitted last tutorial notes. So just do them, as we are going along. It's not a lot to write. If you attend the tutorial, it takes about, just after you attend the tutorial, you're fresh, you take an hour and you write it down. It's, a one-pager that you have to write. So I urge you to do it at this point, because it is marked, and then at the end you will just say I didn't do X, Y, Z, and then submit all of them together. That doesn't work, and it's very difficult then also for the grading to happen. So I see that many of you are attending the tutorials. So in every tutorial, I think there are about 14-15 people who do attend. So it is important that if you've attended, it's just a sort of reflection on the discussion and the video that you're seeing. So please submit the tutorials as soon as possible. The first one should definitely be submitted by this week, so that you don't have this kind of backlog. I've also uploaded, I think, the PPTs and the readings. Just follow, I think that you have the class notes. The readings, I think, one of the feedback that I've got from the previous rounds of this course is that there is a lot of reading. And what I always say is the reading is an additional sort of thing for you. What you need to do is to be able to read in accordance with what we're doing in class. So if the reading, I can't truncate the reading like that. If it's a 15-page reading, you just quickly go through it, but take the points that are, it may deal with a lot more than what we've dealt in class, but I'm going to follow what we have done in class in order to sort of examine you. So in terms of like your minor one and other exams, just follow what we've done in class. From the reading, you need to take only that which we have, only the ideas and concepts that we have, that we are covering in class. I'm not going to ask you beyond that. All right, so I'll see you, some of you, for the tutorial today, and others, everybody, on Thursday. Thank you. But please do put on cameras. I think it's just 2 or 3 people who put on their cameras, and that's not good. I think we have to have a system where we, maybe have like day 1, we have the first 10, day 2, we have another 10 to 20. So let's say Aarti to Aryan or Bhukya, we just commit to putting on your camera. So on Thursday, I want Aarti, Abhijit, Abhinay, Aditya, Narayan, Aditya Raj, Aditya Singh, Animesh, Anshul, Arnesh, Aryan, and Bhukya to put on your cameras. So be prepared that you're going to put on your cameras. All right? Can I have a yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Great.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So I'll see you on Thursday. I'll end the meeting. Thank you.